Hi, so now we are going to start with a new topic, that is electromagnetic spectrum. We are continuing with remote sensing. In this lecture, we will try to understand how is this electromagnetic spectrum or the different portions of electromagnetic spectrum, how they are being used in remote sensing. Okay, so what you can see on the screen, we've seen this image before also. This is describing the entire electromagnetic spectrum, okay, the different parts of electromagnetic spectrum, the visible one, before visible one, what comes is ultraviolet rays, then X-rays and gamma rays, and beyond visible, that is infrared and microwave. And then further on, it goes to radio waves, right? So now in this electromagnetic spectrum, the portion that is actually used for remote sensing will be visible light, that is 7 into 10 raised to 14 hertz to 4 into 10 raised to 14 hertz, and beyond it, okay, most of the time we'll be actually talking about the wavelengths, not frequencies. So basically it will go from 0.4 to 0.7 microns, the visible band. Then we go to infrared band. Infrared band goes to 0.7 to nearly 14 microns. Okay, and then we even make use of these microwaves. They are of the wavelength in the range of 0.1 to even up to 30 centimeters. Okay, so these are the bands which will be actually used for remote sensing. We will understand what is the significance of each band and why certain bands are not being used also. Okay, so the next slide is talking about various portions. Now let's come to the first one, ultraviolet rays, a UV portion. Okay, this has very short wavelength. Now if you look at this, UV will come before the blue color. Correct? So this is shorter wavelengths which can be used for remote sensing, but mostly what is used are the visible, infrared and microwave. This in case of ultraviolet rays, the radiation is just beyond the violet portion of the visible wavelength. Okay, that's why the name is ultraviolet. Now, some earth surface materials, typically speaking rocks and minerals, they will emit certain visible light, okay, when illuminated by UV radiation. That is the only, application of this UV portion of EMS. In fact, this has very limited use in remote sensing. However, it can be used. Next is visible spectrum. Now, visible spectrum is, it starts from 0.4 and it goes to 0.7 microns. Okay. The longest visible wavelength will be obviously this side, the red one, and the shortest will be on this side, that is violet. Okay. The common wavelengths of what we perceive as particular colors from visible portion of the spectrums are given here. These are the, if I break each color, then it has a different wavelengths. All the wavelengths are mentioned here. Okay, and these rays of all these colors, when they mix, what is formed is a white light. Right? Now, visible spectrum so you can say somewhere around 0.5 to 0.6 microns is actually used to detect water bodies. Okay, so usually this 0.5 to 0.6 micron can penetrate water body very well. That's how, in the image you can clearly see the water bodies when you are using this particular bandwidth, 0.5 to 0.6. Similarly, you can also use this bandwidth to distinguish between vegetal cover, okay, surface vegetal cover. So usually this 0.5 to 0.6 will be very useful in remote sensing. Similarly, 0.6 to 0.7 will be actually able to tell you the different types of vegetation or different species. When you use this 0.6 to 0.7, the different types of vegetal covers can be identified, can be contrasted. So what it actually does is 0.6 to 0.7, it will actually pick up the chlorophyll pigment, or rather this particular wavelength is absorbed by your chlorophyll pigment. That is why, based on the absorption, now different species will have different composition of chlorophyll pigment. So obviously they will absorb this range based on the composition of chlorophyll. That's why this particular wavelength will be used in demarcating the different species. So how do you make use of this particular characteristics? Is, let's say you are trying to study what is the area in a particular state which is under one particular crop. Let's say in Goa, I want to find out how much is the area which is covered by Rabi crops, or how much is covered by Kharif crops, or how much is, let's say, tree cover, how much is the pasture land. Then you can make use of the images which are captured in the range of 0.6 to 0.7. Right? The next portion is infrared. Now, infrared region will have wavelengths of around 0.7 to 100 microns, more than 100 times wider than the visible portion. Okay. Now, infrared region will be again divided into reflected infrared and the emitted or thermal infrared. Okay. So, reflected infrared covers wavelengths of 0.7 to 3 microns. Okay. The thermal infrared is quite different from the visible and reflected infrared portions, as the energy is essentially the radiation that is emitted from the Earth's surface. As we go further on with this particular topic, you will understand that Earth also radiates a lot of it. It's not just that sun is the only source of energy. Earth also is source of energy. Okay. So this particular characteristic will be also used in capturing the images. Right. Thermal infrared covers wavelength of around 3 to 100 microns. Now, middle infrared, that is abbreviated as MWIR, and long infrared abbreviated as LWIR, are within the thermal infrared region. These radiations are emitted from warm objects such as Earth's surface. Okay, they are used in satellite remote sensing for measurements of Earth's land, sea surface temperatures. Then thermal infrared remote sensing is also used for detection of forest fires. Okay, so I'll just show you one image. Now, over here you can see what is used is this infrared spectrum, infrared portion of the EMS has been used to capture this particular image. Now, can you see these red dots over here? Okay, these red dots are basically forest fires which are picked up in IR portion, infrared portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, so it gets very well highlighted. If I had used maybe any other band, this particular thing will not be seen so much in contrast. Okay. Now, going back to infrared, somewhere around 0.7 to 0.8 microns. Okay. These will border between visible and near infrared. Okay. Now, this near infrared regions are suitable for recognizing differences in land use. Okay. So, if you want to sense the amount of green biomass or vegetation, you can use near infrared region. Okay, 0.8 to 1 will be suitable for water bodies, okay, particularly land water body delineation, okay, where if you want to study, let's say, how much is the coastal erosion and erosion, you can make use of this 0.8 to 1 micrometers. Understood. Similarly, reflected infrared Now reflected infrared, when I'm talking about, it's actually spanning between 0.7 to 3. But somewhere between 1.55 to 1.75. This particular range of reflected infrared can even penetrate thin clouds. So you want to study cloud cover, this particular range can be used. Or this is also used to get a good contrast between different types of vegetal species. You want to find out which are the different types of crops in a particular area, you can make use of this particular bandwidth. Also, it's suitable for discriminating moisture in the soil. So just looking at the image which is clicked in 1.55 to 1.75, you can find out which part will have more moisture content, which is a dry area. You can forecast what will be whether it is going into desertification, there is any chances of desertification. Okay. Also, the same region can be used for differentiating snow from clouds. Okay. Then thermal infrared is little larger wavelengths. It's 3 to 5. Okay. Now it's 3 to 14. 3 to 5 will be a part of thermal infrared, a portion of thermal infrared region itself, which will be suitable for detecting fires, okay, or volcanoes or lava flows. And the higher values, higher ranges of wavelengths, that is 8 to 14, will be optimum for terrain mapping, okay, vegetation stress analysis it is called, or to delineate or to find out where are the different types of soils with different moisture contents, okay, or it is called soil mapping. That is possible if you take images in higher range of thermal infrared region. And the next is microwave region. Now microwave region will have very large wavelengths. You can see they range between 1 mm to 1 meter. So this particular portion of EMS will cover the longest wavelengths used in remote sensing, and it's actually the most useful portion of electromagnetic spectrum. Now it's not within the scope of our syllabus, but if you try to study remote sensing in detail, okay, there is a huge scope for this particular area in civil engineering. People are doing their PhDs in remote sensing, because if you want to study anything at a larger scale, there is no other option apart from remote sensing. So now if I compare with the other region, microwave has got way higher applications. Okay, the shorter wavelengths have properties similar to thermal infrared region, meaning somewhere around 1 mm if you go, then it will behave almost like thermal infrared region. But the higher or the longer wavelengths will be used for radio broadcast. So basically, if you remember the image, microwave region is between infrared region and the radio region, right? Microwave sensing will be actually active as well as passive form of remote sensing. Longer wavelengths of microwave radiation can penetrate through cloud cover, haze, dust, okay, and basically it can pass through all the types of aerosols, okay. So even if you want to take an image while it is raining, you can take, if you are making use of microwave portion, okay. So this property basically allows detection of microwave energy under almost all weather conditions. So you are weather independent when you are taking images, okay, from satellite or from aircrafts, okay. Going ahead, passive microwave sensing is similar in the concept to thermal remote sensing. Passive microwave sensors detect naturally emitted microwave energy, exactly opposite to active. Active will require you to send some radiations. Passive will actually detect the naturally emitted microwave. So if suppose you are taking energy, if you are taking images of volcano, it will detect the heat which is sent from the earth's surface and click the images.
The microwave energy recorded by passive sensors can be one of these four types. Emitted by the atmosphere, it can be reflected from the earth's surface features, it can be emitted by the surface. Now, which is the energy which is emitted by surface? Let's say we all know Earth is also one of the radiating objects, right? So we have magma flowing inside the core. So in case of there is a volcano or any other reason, the Earth can be radiating out heat. Okay, there are many surface features which can be radiating out heat. So that energy can be recorded by passive sensors. Okay, and it can be also transmitted from the subsurface. So which is just as I spoke, if something is hidden inside the surface, okay, below the subsurface, it's not come on to the top of the surface. That energy can also be recorded by passive sensors. Okay. Now the applications of microwave remote sensing is in meteorology, right? Then hydrology, oceanography. So basically, depending on the wavelength. Now microwave remote sensing. When I say microwave, it's a range of wavelength, right? So based on the type of wavelength that or the value of the wavelength that is used, the function also changes, right? In meteorology, you could detect the percentage of moisture content, or you can also find out what is the amount of ozone layer present in the atmosphere. In case of hydrology, you can detect the soil moisture content in using passive remote sensing. Okay, and in oceanography, you can find out how much is the ice, okay, below the seabed, or you could determine what are the sea currents, what are the ocean winds. All these things are possible using passive remote sensing in microwave region, right? The next one is determine the uh, atmospheric profiles that I just said, that is a part of meteorology. Then ozone content, and you can also determine bedrock. Now this is something which you have so far not seen, right? So how do you actually determine the bedrock? That means we as civil engineers, this is a very important thing. Okay, using microwave remote sensing, you can find out at what depth or where is the bedrock available, or what type of the bedrock is available. How? Because see, these microwaves are waves of larger wavelengths. Okay, so they can pass inside, pass through the superficial soil or soft soil matter, and that they can help you in determining the properties of the bedrock available. Okay, uh, it also measures soil moisture content, as the microwave emission is influenced by moisture content. Okay, it measures the winds, it can detect the pollutants, right? It can detect if there are oil spills in the ocean, correct? Microwave remote sensing. Okay, now active microwave remote sensing, since the word active is used, then obviously we know it has its own source of microwave radiations. One of the examples is radar. Radar is nothing but radio detection and ranging. Okay, which essentially characterizes the function and operation of radar sensors. Now these sensors emit microwaves, or they can go up to the radio signals towards the targets, and it detects the backscattered portion of the signal. So whatever is bouncing back, it detects that signal. The strength of the scattered signal is measured to discriminate between the different targets. So basically, when you send these microwave or radio signals or microwave, I'm saying actually these are two different wavelengths. But when I'm talking about microwave into bracket radio signals, so I'm talking about that interface wherein the range. See, in electromagnetic spectrum, we've already seen that after red is infrared, then microwave and radio. So when I'm talking about a microwave range, the one which is nearing the radio range, so something which has very high wavelengths. Okay, these radiations, they get bounced back, and based on the type of surface that they are hitting against, their backscattering also will change. So based on this particular property, based on the time and delay between the transmission and reflected signal. So you remember something like this we had discussed in hydrographic survey, when we were talking about sonar waves. Okay, now that's a different type of waves that we are talking about, but basically the same principle was used. time taken for the transmission of the signal and how much time it takes to reflect back, that can determine the distance between the target, okay, or the range between the target. So this particular property is used to determine the properties of the targets used. So here basically we are talking about two types of energy interactions. Although in physics we have studied that there are three types. Which are the three types that we have studied in physics? One is scattering, one is absorption, and one is reflection. Okay. Over here in remote sensing we are more concerned about the scattering and absorption. Okay. Now scattering will occur when the particles or large gas molecules present in atmosphere. So this is basically happening in air. Okay. These will interact and cause electromagnetic radiations to be redirected. Meaning if they're traveling in one particular course and if there is water droplets present or there are any other gas, heavy gas particles, molecules present, then they will scatter these electromagnetic radiations. Okay, then how much will this scattering take place? That will depend on the factors such as what is the wavelength of radiation, in what range are you sending the radiation, whether it is microwave or whether it is in ultraviolet or whether it is infrared. So based on the type of radiation, the scattering also changes. The abundance of particles or gases, so how much is the density or how much is the volume of the air, how much is the presence of gas molecules, that will also affect the scattering, and the distance the radiation traveled through atmosphere. Now based on the type of scattering, there are or based on the wavelengths that are traveling in the atmosphere, there are three types of scatterings. One is relay scattering, one is Mie scattering, and one is non-selective scattering. So let's understand what is the meaning of all these three types of scattering. Now, relay scattering occurs when the particles are very small. Okay, so this is very important as compared to the wavelength of the radiation. Okay, so these could be particles such as small specks of dust, nitrogen, oxygen molecules. Okay, now when does this happen? I told you one major factor that affects the type of scattering is the wavelength. Now, Rayleigh scattering is expected for shorter wavelengths. Okay, it will scatter more. Okay, the energy, radiations will scatter more when the wavelength is shorter. It doesn't mean for longer wavelengths it doesn't scatter, but shorter wavelengths get scattered very fast. Okay, now where does it happen? It will happen in the upper atmosphere. Okay, the fact that the sky appears blue during the day is because of this phenomenon. Now, what do you mean by this? See, in the visible part of the spectrum, which is the wave, which is the light, color of light, which is having the least wavelength, obviously blue. Red will have the largest wavelength in the visible band I'm talking about. So that's the reason, and I've already made a statement. For shorter wavelengths, what happens? The scattering is more. So blue color, blue light will scatter more. That is the reason why we say sky always appears blue. Why doesn't it appear red? Because red will have a little higher wavelength. So it will not get that color. Okay. As the sunlight passes through atmosphere, shorter wavelengths, that is blue in the visible spectrum, are scattered more than the longer visible wavelengths. At sunrise and sunset, the light has to travel farther through the atmosphere. Okay, then the midway, and the scattering of shorter wavelength is more complete. This leaves the greater portion of the longer wavelength to penetrate the atmosphere. So that is the basic reason why the sky is always blue. The next is Mie scattering. Now this will occur when the particles are just about the same size as that of the wavelength of the radiation. So when there is dust, pollen, smoke or water vapor, these are the common type of particles present in atmosphere which will cause Mie scattering. Okay, again this will affect longer wavelength. So what's the difference between this one and the previous one? Previous one is mostly seen for the shorter wavelengths. This will be seen for longer wavelengths. Then those affected by Rayleigh scattering. Mie scattering mostly occurs in the lower portion of atmosphere. where larger particles are more abundant and dominate when the cloud conditions are overcast. Alright, so what you have to remember is the type of wavelength and where exactly it happens in the atmosphere. Correct? So this is basically for the lower portions of the atmosphere. Then there is something called non-selecting scattering. This is the final scattering mechanism, okay, and it's called non-selective. This occurs when the particles are much larger than the wavelength of the radiation. Now, water droplets and large dust particles will cause this type of scattering. Now, non-selective scattering gets its name from the fact that all the types of wavelength can get scattered almost about equally. So, this type of scattering causes fog, okay, or clouds to appear white, because all now, see, why will it appear white? I had told you some time back. White light will be seen when there are all the types of colors available in your radiations. So when all these colors, they interact with each other, white light is produced. So when this blue, green, red light, they all get scattered and in equal quantities, you will get a white light. Alright, so if I ask you what is the reason sky is white, sky is blue and clouds are white, what is the reason? Because sky will be blue because of Rayleigh scattering, which is happening in the upper portions of the atmosphere, whereas clouds, where will they be? They are in the lower levels of the atmosphere where non-selective scattering takes place. That gives a white color to the clouds. Alright, then the next phenomenon that happens is absorption. Now, absorption is another main mechanism when electromagnetic radiations interact with atmosphere. So what actually happens is the different components of atmosphere will have different ways to react with the electromagnetic spectrum. Say for example, we are talking about ozone. We all know ozone is going to absorb ultraviolet radiations which are coming from sun. Then let's say there is carbon dioxide present in atmosphere. Now carbon dioxide is always referred to as greenhouse gas. Why do we prefer it as greenhouse gas? We know that it has the capacity to store the heat. So when we're talking about the heat, we're actually talking about the infrared part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So if there is carbon dioxide present in atmosphere, it will absorb the far infrared portion. Okay, it will always cause heating of that portion in the atmosphere. Okay, the water vapor, if it is present in the atmosphere, it will absorb the long infrared or short microwave region, the interface between the long infrared and the short microwave region, that is the radiation between 22 microns to 1 meter. So presence of water vapor can also cause a lot of absorption of in the lower, where is the water vapor presence? Obviously it is present in the lower atmosphere. So in the lower atmosphere, if you are having these infrared or short wave microwave regions, they'll be absorbed by the water particles. So exactly using this knowledge, we try to find out which part of the spectrum can be used in getting the information. So that is actually called atmospheric windows. So you know the gases will absorb electromagnetic energy in very specific regions. Okay, they will influence in the spectrum. So we can look out for these particular interactions for remote sensing purpose.